Let me challenge y'all real quick too. I know you're at a Christian university, but the thing that I have found out traveling university, is that people think that the Bible is a good book and that Christianity is just one of the better religions or it's the religion of America, and they don't assume that Christianity is true. So everything I'm about to say to you is completely pointless if you either A, don't have a relationship with the Lord, or B, don't believe the Bible, because that's all I got. So I'm going to read two verses because this book is not just true. This book is not as good as true, and it's life. And so the verse I'm going to read to you, two of them in Psalm 1, are not just aimed at men, but I'm going to use these two verses and then go academically for a second to talk about manhood, and then I'm going to jump back into the scriptures. Can I do that? Awesome. Here are the two verses I'm going to read. Psalm 1, verses 1 and 2. The Bible says, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor does he sit in the seat of those who scoff. But his delight is in the law of the Lord." Sorry, I'm going to read three verses. "And in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bring forth its fruit in due season, whose leaf will not wither, and whatever he does will prosper." Father, you are our Father. But even as I say that, I'm convicted by the reality that without Jesus Christ, second person of the Holy Trinity, coming in the fullness of time, living under the law, doing everything that you said to do, not doing anything that you said not to do, he became the perfect sacrifice for our sin. He died on Calvary's cross. He rose on the third day, and he right now, even as I pray, is seated at your right hand. And there are people in this room that believe that truth, and there are people in this room who don't. But Lord, as my brother Isaiah just said, there are people who know that God has a purpose, but don't necessarily understand what that is. And so even as we talk about biblical manhood tonight, I pray that what would truly be extrapolated is the reality that you are God, that you created all of us for you and for you alone, that you sent your son Jesus to die for us because we all were born in sin. We all have sinned and fallen short of your glory. Jesus is the only person you accept because you only accept perfection. Lord, allow us to see our sin tonight in such a way that it makes us really appreciative of the gospel, but even more than that, it makes us long to live those truths out, to sacrifice who we are, that we might receive who you are, and live every day, not just as people on earth who have you as a part of our plan, but people who are overwhelmingly cracked up by the reality that Jesus Christ truly is Lord over everything in our lives. Lord, I pray that you would fill me with your Holy Spirit. Would you guide me in all truth? Would you, by the end of this message, let us all know that you've been here? Would you do more work in my heart than anybody else's? In Jesus' name, amen. So I brought all of this stuff. This is 2 pages of notes that I'm not going to go over with you. About 4 years ago, I got asked to speak on biblical manhood in front of a whole bunch of athletes. And so as I talked about biblical manhood, the real issue that everybody had, and the real issue that everybody has, is there is no verse in the scriptures that says a man is ... What the Bible instead does is tells you what a man does, how a man lives, how a man acts. The issue is a lot of times in scripture you don't see man as in male highlighted. You see man as in mankind. Am I making sense? So even in Psalm 1, the verse I just read to you is not aimed at just a male, it's aimed at all of humanity. So I'm going to do a couple of academic things real quick. Can I do that? I'm going to do it in the Virginia way. That's where I'm from, and so I'm going to do this as fast as I possibly can. So you have to listen, because if you don't have your ears on tight, you won't understand what I'm saying. The first thing that you have to understand is the very sharp distinction between a male and a female. What is the easiest thing to know about a male and a female? The Adam's apple, which is the protrusion right here of the larynx, and the male reproductive organ, aka the penis, are the two things that separate every single man from a woman, right? There are things that men can do that women can't, things that women can do that men can't. Here are 2 examples that are very, very easy. A woman cannot naturally impregnate another woman. A man can't have a baby. It's just that simple. We are equal, but we are not the same. And what Satan desires to do is make you think that all of us are the same, that anything you can do, I can do better. We all can do all the same stuff. That ain't true. That ain't God made us. Make sense? So simply put, there first has to be a distinction between male and female. I just made that distinction. What you will notice about the 2 things that distinguish us, if I went to the female, you know what distinguishes the male from the female. But the amazing thing about the 2 distinguishing factors of the male is both of them protrude. That means lead out front, stick out. As we look through the scriptures, it would be hard to figure out what manhood looks like from fallen man. Because ultimately, how to be a father from a fallen man is not a great way to learn how to be a father. Some of you have broken relationships with your dad or wish you had better ones, and you know that a fallen man can't teach you how to be a perfect one. So the only two biblical examples we have of true men are Adam before he falls and Jesus. That said, really, if we're going to figure out what biblical manhood looks like, once we establish male versus female, we also all know that there's a difference between a boy and a man, right? My son Simeon, who's 7, certainly would be classified as a man. But the question is, so when does he become a man? Does he become a man at age 10, age 12, age 18 in America, age 24, when he gets a wife and a house and a dog and a kid and SUV that he can drive and top down listen to some Jesus music? Is that when he can say he's a man? Or can he say he's a man before that? I mean, if he's in Israel by the time he's 14, he might have a whole head of cattle, a wife, and some kids. But does that make him a man? He ain't 14. My ancestors, I'm from the South, and so my ancestors have an aunt that got married when she was 16. And so some people would say, well, at that point she had to become a woman. But that in and of itself tells you the distinction, right, between a girl and a woman. As I watch ESPN, I'm a basketball fan. I was a basketball player once upon a time. I'm now what we call an athlete. An athlete is one who is currently playing. I'm an athlete. I'm done. And so as I watch it, Mark Jackson will often say, that was a grown man move. Now, he's talking about the NBA, right? So all of these men are at some level men. But when he says that's a grown man's move, he's highlighting the reality that there is a certain level of maturity that a person can reach where this rites of passage happens, and they can say, I've reached a certain level that's not like everybody else. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So what I seek to do real quick is take you through these two verses to show you what I believe biblical manhood is. If we're going to talk about biblical manhood, even beyond male versus female, even beyond boy versus man, there's still, after you become a man, some element of biblical manhood that's not just manhood. A man can be a man without necessarily being a biblical man. So, I'm going to take you through what we call the 4 stages, and I'm going to show you those 4 stages here in Psalm chapter 1, verse 2. If you're a female and you're going, this message is not relevant to me because he's talking about biblical manhood, here's what you need to do. The stages are the same for a female to go through. The major difference that all I'm going to do tonight is focus on men, but the stages are called something different for females. All I'm going to do is focus on the manhood side of it. Can I do that? Y'all need to answer me. I'm going to go sit down. Can I do that? Okay, go. In verses 1 and 2, I want to focus on 2 specifically. The Bible says, but in his, meaning God's law, is his delight. And in his law does he meditate day and night. And so here are the 4 stages. I'm going to give them to you all at one time, then I'm going to go back and identify each one. When you talk to people like Zane Hood, Robert Lewis, when you talk to a man like Joe White, who's the president of Camp Camps, they are people who have started things like Promise Keepers, Men's Fraternity, Men at the Cross. There are all of these things that want to focus on manhood. But when you ask them, what is your definition of manhood? Every single one of them has a different definition. But one thing that we can all agree on, all across every single culture in all of the world, with the exception of America, kinda, there is this level of manhood. There's a rites of passage. Now, before I can get to these 4 stages, I've got to give you the 3 lies that every man is told in America, so especially in America, but it's pervasive throughout the world. Can I do that? Here's lie number 1. Real men enjoy sexual exploits at a fantastic level and frequency. I don't know about you, but the way that I was raised, I was taught, you're not a man until you have sex. The first time you have sex, then you can say you're a man. We all know that that ain't the case, right? If you don't know that that's not the case, let me inform you. That's not true. Anybody can label somebody. That's not hard to do. It ain't rocket science. Deer do it in the woods all the time. I live in southwestern Pennsylvania. It happens all the time. Lie number 2. Real men fear nothing due to the ability to accomplish great feats of strength. Particularly with an audience with so many athletes, there are many of us who find our identity in how much we can lift, push down, pick up, or pull. But the reality is that has nothing to do with manhood. I can tell you tons of, animals can pull way more than we can. That doesn't make them men. Lie number 3, real men have nice jobs, lots of money, big houses, and expensive cars. I don't know about you, but the way that I was raised, and if you turn on the television and watch it for 5 seconds, isn't this the pervasive lie? You're not a man unless you have a lot of cars, you have a lot of money, you have a nice job, you have sex with girls, and you're athletic. If you're not those things, you might as well not have a male reproductive organ. That's the message that our world sends. Am I right or wrong? dope. That being the case, then we have to back up and go, well, wait, like when God created Adam, because Adam would have just been by himself even before God created the woman, what was true about Adam? When God creates Jesus, when Jesus, the second person of the Holy Trinity, comes through the portal of the Virgin Womb and he steps into humanity, what is true about Jesus that was also true about Adam prior to the fall? What makes these two people not just male, but men? The process of these 4 stages. First stage is called the warrior stage, if you are a man. Just for the fun of it, I'm going to do it for the girls too. The stage for womanhood is called the maiden stage. Everybody in every culture goes through this stage in some form or fashion. Second stage is called the knight stage. For the female, it's called the lady stage. Third stage is called the wise man stage. For the lady, it's called the governor stage. Both stages, the fourth one, are called the monarch stage. Now again, you can jump in any culture and they may call them something different. If you study Native American cultures, you know that the wise man stage is called the shaman stage. That's the idea when you are now not only, I'll get to it. Let me back up to warrior. Can I do that? Warrior maiden, this idea. I'm only going to focus on men because I only got time to focus on men. There is a sharp distinction between the two, but I'm just going to focus on men. Let me focus. Here we go. So in the warrior stage, every boy, notice I said boy, the journey starts at age 0 where a boy learns to fight. Study any boy in psychology and you will learn that that boy very quickly learns to fight. I have a son, I have 5 kids, I have 2 sons. Simeon is my oldest, Judah is my 4th oldest. And Simeon and Judah, the thing that they want to do is knock somebody down. That's just the way that they work. When you walk into my house, I don't care who you are, male, female, dog, animal, whatever, Judah and Simeon want to knock you down. It's just the way that they work. Why do they want to do that? Because they're in the stage where they're learning to fight. They learn that there's a need to be aggressive to fight. What Isaiah said, to never give up, never surrender, never stop, to not quit. It's not, and Simeon 7, Judah's 2. But you can see built into their DNA that idea, I'm not going to back down. There's some girl up in here going, well, I don't do that either. That's cool. I'm just focusing on what men need to learn, so that's where we're going to stay. In this stage is the stage of initiation. How many, I was going to ask, how many of y'all are in a gang? Don't raise your hand. Just listen. If you are in a gang, have ever been a gang, ever studied gang mentality, I work with urban students and have worked with urban students for the last 12 years. And I sit down at times with gangbangers, and the gangbangers understand these 4 stages. Because before you can get into any gang, you have to be initiated. They know that there's some process through which you go where you learn fighting is necessary. This is who we are. This is how we get it done. So in the warrior stage, it is the stage where you learn to fight, the need to never give up, never surrender. When you move into the second stage, usually people move through this first stage, ages 0 to about 6 or 7. The second stage, called the knight stage, begins around between ages 8 and 12. In this first stage, people learn to take action, to reject passivity, to go get it done, to initiate and to be initiated. In the second stage, which we call the knight stage, is all about cultivation. It's about learning what to fight for. So once you learn that you need to fight, you can't just go fight everybody and anything. You have to strategically learn, what do I fight for? This is the stage where men generally learn from their dad. Notice how messed up we are in America. That is not necessarily the case. We're not learning from our dad because often he's not there. Whether he's not there emotionally, not there physically, not there spiritually, not there financially, not there in some way that we even want him to be there, God inherently put in us a longing for our Father, which is just the dopest thing in the world. Because we all recognize that it's there. And when that hole is missing, we don't go through these 4 stages properly, and we'll go to codependence. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. So in this first stage where you initiate this warrior stage, you learn to fight, you learn dependence. In this second stage, you learn independence. This is the stage where you are between 8 and 12 you started, you finish it between ages 16 and 18, depending on what culture you live in. That's the stage where you learn to become a man on your own. In this warrior stage, you go, I know somebody needs to be taking care of me, so I can, under the shadow of their wing, start to explore stuff, because I know that somebody else is protecting me. In the independent stage, you get that opportunity to say, I know I'm under the shadow of somebody's wing, but I want to begin to explore things and do them for myself, to understand them for myself. If you are a believer in this room, for example, and you came from a believing family where your family were believers, confirmation in most denominations generally happens around age 12, where you make your faith your own. You're old enough to where you can make decisions, but they recognize you're still not in adulthood. You are still in some stage prior to adulthood, but not quite a toddler, not quite an adolescent. You're somewhere in the boy or girl stage. Am I making sense to everybody? Puberty is happening. You're learning who you are. You're learning who you're not. You're learning what your body is like. You're encountering culture. All of those things, and you're becoming an individual who can think for him or herself in this second stage, the ninth stage. You learn to pledge allegiance. You learn to accept responsibility. You learn that everything can't be somebody else's fault. You begin to reason. You begin to use logic. As a matter of fact, on the girl side, just so you know, one of the things that we studied 4 years ago, and it's still true today, a woman encounters her menstrual cycle 3 years prior to a woman who does not have her dad in the house, on average. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is if you can't properly move through these stages and properly engage the real world, you're going to have to make big boy decisions way before you need to, and big girl decisions way before you need to. Am I making sense? It also affects even the way that your body works. How many of y'all know that when you're stressed out, you perform a whole lot less well on the athletic field? When you're either stressed out in any way, it could be good stress, it could be bad stress, but often when you're stressed out, you don't perform as well. That same thing happens in those stages of life. So that's the stage of cultivation. Third stage is what we call the stage of implementation. It's the wise man stage. It's the stage where you get out on your own. So some cultures, like I said, it ends right around 16 to 17, 18. For America, often that stage is when you go to college. You're about 18 years old, depending on when you started school, 17, 18. And it'll go until you're out of college or post-grad, almost until you're about 24 years old if you end up going to grad school or something like that. But in the wise man stage, it's the stage of implementation. It's the stage where you are learning what are the best stratagems to employ when out fighting. So in the first stage, you learn that there's a need to fight. In the second stage, you learn what to fight for. In the third stage, you learn how do I fight? How do I do this in a real world? We call it being interdependent. You learn, hey, I'm on my own just like y'all are right now. I mean, those of you who are either paying for college, maybe your parents are paying for some of your college, but not all of it. Some of you, maybe your parents are paying for all of it, but you recognize that you still got to find an apartment, you still got to make some decisions that you have to make on your own. What we call the big boy decisions, right? The big girl decisions. As we say in our house, from diaper to big boy undies decisions. The reason that that's important is because if you don't go through that stage, you won't learn how to make those decisions on your own. You'll always be relying on somebody else to make decisions for you. And let's be real, folks. It would be easy for me to sit here and talk about biblical manhood and I step out of this for a second and say, some of y'all sitting over here, I can see on your face, everybody around you is dictating who you are, where you sit, what you do, and how you dress. That is clear. The only reason I'm telling you that is because I sat where you sat. I'm not tripping. You know that that's the truth. You know that's why it's hard for you to look in the mirror in your own eyes, because you don't know who you are. And there are some of you that are the ringleaders that are in this room and you control everybody around you. But the only reason you're doing that is because you know that they love you. Folks, when you are in the interdependent stage, you recognize that you need people and that people need you. You recognize that you can begin to manipulate those relationships as well. And if you don't use those relationships for right reasons, I'm just here to remind you, as a good daddy would, you're going to reap what you sow. There's going to be a time when you step into an arena where somebody recognizes that they can manipulate the relationship with you just like you manipulated it with other people and didn't use what God gave you for His glory. And they will manipulate you. Living witness. Thank God for deliverance and for His gospel. Folks, this stage of interdependence is huge. It is where you will make probably the greatest mistakes, but when you come to the greatest revelations of who you are. The thing I want to encourage you to do is take part in the process. Don't be that person that never asks the questions of why you're at Malone University, why you're in college to begin with, why you make the decisions that you make. There will be some of you who leave this room that want to make that decision, and somebody is going to make you avoid that by inviting you to something else, telling you now that's the way Satan works. He wants to steal that seed as fast as possible. And some of y'all know you need to get out of this room, you need to get in God's presence and stop playing with God and playing with the people around you. So I tell my kids every day, a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old that go to school every day. I took them to school this morning. Why are you going to school, guys? From the back seat, Jada says to me, to be a missionary. Simeon says to me, to tell my friends about Jesus. Because I teach my kids. We could have homeschooled you. The reason we're not homeschooling you is because I want a context for you to share the gospel from age 6, age 7, so that people can understand who Jesus is, and you don't have to be who the world tells you to be. You can be whoever you want to be for the rest of your life, provided that that's what God calls you to do. But most of us just embrace whatever the world says about us. It is in this third stage that most of you might be in. I'm telling you now that if you do not be careful, you're going to find yourself stuck in this stage for a long, long time. Can I tell you how many people I sit down with who are still stuck in this stage, and it is apparent that they're still stuck in this stage because they don't necessarily want big boy responsibilities, but they know that they're not little kids. They grown men that sit in their house and play video games more than they spend time with their kids. Just saying, it happens all the time. This fourth stage is the monarch stage. The monarch stage is very, very simple. It's the stage where you go from interdependence to dependence, spelled differently than the first time of dependence. This time, it's an NTS, not an ENCE. It's, I'm now able to take care of somebody else. You know you have transitioned in the journey from boy to manhood when you're able to look outside of the self. You remember that Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that when I was a child, I thought like a child, I understood like a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. The idea in that entire text is he's talking about love, right? He's beginning to understand that it's a boy thing, that means a childish thing to focus so much on me. I told you I got 5 kids, they're all under 7, all they care about is themselves. As that continues, there are some people who continue to say, well, that's my vice, you know, I'm a sinner, so yeah, I'm selfish. No, the reality is many of us know that God has called us, as we say at camp, to be third, to put him first, to put other people second, and to put ourselves last. But oh man, when Paul says do everything without, do nothing with selfish ambition in Philippians chapter 2, many of us don't even understand that concept. We go, how do you do nothing with selfish ambition? Because pretty much everything I do for me. In the text, you hear, blessed is the man who does all of these things. But verse 2, he focuses in the law of the Lord is his delight. In his law, he meditates day and night. Now, I don't know about you, but I've read through the scriptures, and as I look at the law of the Lord, I go, how does he delight in this? I mean, this is hard stuff. Do nothing without selfish ambition. To him who knows to do good, James chapter 4, verse 17, and he does not do it, it's evil, or it's sin. The thought of foolishness is sin, as we hear in Proverbs chapter 24, verse 9. I hear all of the 10 Commandments, and I see how far I fall short, and I go, how is the man who meditates in God's law day and night, how is he blessed by this? How is he excited by this? Because I know when I look at the 10 Commandments, when I look at the 613 precepts flowing from them, when I look at the Old Testament, when I look at the New Testament, I see a broken individual in the mirror, and therefore I recognize in front of the Lord, just like Job did, oh man, without Jesus, I'm nothing. I'm done. I'm stuck. And Jesus is not just in my life with me quoting my little Philippians 13. I can do 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Taking that verse completely out of context, saying I can do stuff because God gave me the ability to do stuff. No, the idea that Paul was communicating in Philippians chapter 4, if you read the entire chapter, is he had learned how to lose all things. He's writing from a prison. He's not writing from a locker room. Paul understands that God can strip everything from him, take anything from him, because he understood what C.S. Lewis said, any man who has God plus anything has nothing more than a man who has God alone. And there are some of you in this room that are finding your identity in all that you can do. You're finding your identity in who you hang around and who hangs around you. You find your identity in how many girls you can get, how many guys you can get, how you look, and all this other junk that is going to fade away. In 1 John chapter 2, we hear, do not love the world or the things in the world, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but it's of the world. And the world will pass away, and all of the lust thereof. So my kids, I love my kids. Every time we go into a store, yesterday I had to take my computer to the shop, took my computer into the shop. You know, every time you go into a computer shop, everything is lighting up. That's just the way computer shops work. If you take kids in there, they're going to have seizures if they ever let. I'm just saying. Took my kids in there. Everything they saw. Everything. Look at this. Look at this. I just kept hearing, look at this. I said, kids, the world will have so many shiny things to offer you. Don't get caught up with that stuff that is not important. So we go home. I am on my couch. I'm doing some work before I come here today because there are some things, some birds I need to kill. My youngest daughter, Susanna, just began to walk several months ago. She turned 1 on October 31st. She was sitting at my feet. I love that little girl. She's awesome. Pause. I got to say this. She has done absolutely nothing for me, and I love her, could not love her anymore. As a matter of fact, last night about 3 a.m., she was crying her head off. I went and got her out of her packing plate, laid her on my chest, and slept with her. I shouldn't say I slept with her, because I didn't sleep at all. That chick smacked me in the face every 30 seconds. Kicked me in the ribs, kicked me in the groin, like you name it, she did it. and I was never angry at her. Now, it doesn't mean anything to you. For all of us that are in this room that are trying to be worth it to God or earn it, or try to get into space, make him love us for what we can do, it'll never happen. He loves you because you're his. Period. So my kids are loving all this stuff. Susanna is walking around the house. My oldest son, Simeon, who's 7, begins to play with her along with the other kids. As they're playing with her, I naturally go back to work because every day they play with her. That's what they do. They love her just like I do. All of a sudden, I hear this giant thud. Now, we live in a house where there are 2 sets of stairs, 2 flights of stairs. I naturally go, what was that? I don't hear any noise from my kids. You know when you don't hear noise from children, it's something bad happening. I walk to the steps and I see my daughter Susanna. We call her Rosie. I do. Susanna means Rose, a beautiful flower. I call her Rosie. And she was there in the middle of the stairs. Naturally, I flip out because I'm thinking that my little Rose is hurt. Flip out on my kids, start yelling at my kids, tell them to go to their room, completely ungodly sin so much in front of my kids. I can so readily tell you that. I'm very sorry. Very sorry for them to disappoint you this story. After I finish yelling at my kids, Susanna stops crying, I take my kids back into the basement, and one by one I grab my kids, I hold their heads, I rub their heads, and I say, Daddy, sorry, nobody deserves to be talked to like that. It doesn't matter who was hurt, it doesn't matter what happened, and I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? My son Simeon is my prophet, he's 7. He comes to me and he's weeping, and he wraps up. Let me just be completely honest, can I be completely honest? So Simeon is trying to comfort me as I'm ranting and raving, screaming through the house as I hold my crying daughter. And he comes to me and he tries to hug my leg. We talk about biblical manhood, right? Ultimately, the definition of biblical manhood from my mind comes from Psalms chapter 78, verse 72, where God speaks all through the chapter about the man that he wanted to lead Israel, who is David. And he talks about who David is in verse 72. But the person that is a male that goes from the 2 stages, boyhood stages of warrior and knight, moves through wise man and monarch, who shepherds all things with integrity, heart, leads with skillful hands. That's biblical manhood for you in a nutshell. But Simeon, as he put his hands on my leg and tried to hug me, I didn't want to hug him. And at that moment it clicked. Man, what if God loved you like this? Something bad happens, something goes wrong, and all of a sudden he doesn't want to be around you anymore. So I took my kids into the basement. Every single one of them came to me weeping. Simeon came to me weeping. He said, Dad, I'm really sorry, but you had a right to be mad at me. I said, son, there's never a right for somebody to be treated like I just treated you. I don't care what happens. That's not the way it should work, and that's not the way it should work. My 7-year-old son, weeping, grabs me, he hugs me, and he says, Daddy, I forgive you, and I love you, and I'm sorry. Listen to me. He said, I'm sorry, I didn't take responsibility. He's 7. There are grown men that won't hear. What's crazy is I go up to the kitchen. I'm still holding my little Rosie. I go up to the kitchen to make dinner for my kids. Simeon comes upstairs a little bit later, tears still in his eyes, and he said, Dad, I have a secret I want to tell you. Whenever my kids say I have a secret, that means they want to do something that they don't want everybody else to know that they do. I said, what is it, buddy? I went my ear to his, and he said, Daddy, I need to make some changes. Boy's 7. You know what it reminded me that he gets that I often don't? He gets that he's loved no matter what, not just by his dad. He's loved by a God who allows him to make changes at age 7. And there are some of you that are in this room that even as I talk about biblical manhood, your first thought is, well, shoot, I'm way behind now. I don't know what stage I'm in. Some of you are in a codependent stage, caught right between 2, and you don't really want the responsibility of being a man. I got a great friend. His name is Eric Ryan. He actually went to Indiana Wesleyan University. God gave him 5 kids in a year. Which is just awesome. He adopted 3 that were not his. His wife couldn't get pregnant as soon as he adopted the 3. I'm sorry, 4 kids now because as soon as they adopted the 3, she found out she was pregnant with twins. One of the twins didn't make it. Anyway, he's got 4 kids in a year. I told him I got 5 the hard way. He got 5 the easy way. Anyway, Eric told me he went on vacation after they adopted these 3 kids. He called me because he said, Pope, I don't know how to do it. He said, I've got 3, man, all under 3. You've got 5 under 7. Don't you go crazy? I said, all the time. He said, don't you just want to let go of responsibility? I said, absolutely. He said, Tomatis, I got to tell you what I did. He went on vacation, and this man is in full-time Christian ministry, just like I am. He said, but if I'm going to be honest with you, man, I went to the library, and I was supposed to be reading this book on spiritual discipline. He said, Pope, I found myself at my house with the book on spiritual disciplines on the bottom and the new Captain America comic book on top. I was reading the Captain America comic book, making everybody think I was reading the spiritual disciplines, you know. Full-time Christian ministry, been in full-time Christian ministry for years. I don't know why we act like people who are in full-time Christian ministry or go to Christian schools don't go through stuff. We do too. I don't know why we act like we don't have responsibility. We go through that too. But the thing that Simeon taught me, and the thing that I learned from the Lord through Simeon, my little prophet, is the days that I want to be worth it to the Lord. He says to me, oh, you were worth it well before you did anything. You were so worth it that I sent my son Jesus to die for you. There are some of you that are in this room that are trying to be good enough to go to heaven. God killed his son over you. He don't want your righteousness. He wants his. If you don't understand that, that means you haven't come to the simple reality that the gospel is what really makes a man a biblical man. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter what you've done. Doesn't matter what your experiences are. If you have not come to the truth that Jesus Christ came in the fullness of time, he lived a perfect life on your behalf, in your stead. He died on Calvary's cross. He rose the third day. And right now, he's seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding on behalf of those whose hearts are his, haven't come to know the gospel. So you might be here trying to hide in plain sight. You might be here trying to fake it till you make it. But I'm here to tell you, you have an opportunity tonight to get right to the Lord because he's tired of playing. I don't know if you are, but he's tired of playing. Father, in the name of Jesus, would you remind us that you're God tonight? Would you remind us that you have formed and fashioned and purposed for you, not for the stuff of this world, not for ourselves, not for anything but you. I pray that you allow us to recognize the biblical manhood comes down to shepherding all things with integrity of heart. There can be no integrity of heart unless we're really willing and ready to deal with the truth that we are born in sin, separated from you, in need of Jesus to save us.